Welcome to Circle Podcast, brought to you by Circle Sanctuary, one of the oldest nature spirituality churches in the United States, connecting people of nature-centered paths around the world. Join us throughout the week for a variety of shows discussing various topics, celebrating the divine in all of its forms through nature worship, rituals, education, and building bridges of community. Welcome to Urban Unwitches, a podcast to educate, inform, and expand the pagan community. Please join our Discord channel, Urban Unwitches Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Urban Unwitches, and listen to all our past podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform. You can also join us on YouTube at Urban Unwitches. Now, back to the show. So you know you're a magical practitioner when I keep turning off the light switch, and it shocks me every time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mentioned it to Tony. I'm like, damn, that light switch shocks me every time. And he said, Dia, then maybe I need to check the outlet. And I went, oh, yeah, that could be a reason. I just thought I was in here getting all the energy up. And so that it was shocking me when I flipped the light switch. And there's nothing to be done about that. But Tony was like, let me go look and see if there's a wire not done down right or something. I'm like, oh, yeah, that can do that.
Yeah.
That didn't cross my mind. Normal things don't cross my mind.
The last two, you dropped glasses of Sancerre on. It wasn't a failure of the technology. You soaked it in wine. And that's not the spirits reaching out, honey. You're an alcoholic. Oh no, I'm the definition of fucking extra. I'm the high priest of extra. We had an entire store meeting about how extra Kyler was and how we love it, but also he may have clinical exhaustion.
Yeah, I would believe that too.
Yeah. Also, this is not a bad thing at all. This is a very, very good thing. But between your beautiful porcelain skin and the deep blood red of that shirt, your rack is amazing in that dress. Like,
oh, thank you. I can't wear a bra or anything, so I feel pretty proud of these.
Oh yeah,
at my age.
like your reputation, they precede you into the room by at least 4.5 minutes.
Yes, they're nice. I like them. Thank you. I had put off wearing this, and I wasted this on the Trumper that I went to dinner with.
Oh,
isn't that terrible? I'm gonna have to wear it. Well, I actually have a date with an artist named Andrew.
Was it the delicious chocolatey man that you showed me?
Yes.
Ooh, girl.
So he stood me up. Here's the thing. He stood me up.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of ghosted me. Like we were supposed to see each other Sunday. And so then he came back to me today and said that he freaked himself out. Like he got up all in his head and kind of freaked himself out. And he's like, I really like you. And I don't, So it's a red flag. It's a little red flag.
Well, no, but I think it's different styles of dating. To me, that's actually a green flag. That means he's insecure, and that does it for me. Like, he's got issues. Like, if there's not a little bit of fixing to happen there, and I'll admit this is not healthy. I'm not saying this is what you should do. I'm just saying I was intimidated by Chris because he seemed to have his shit together, but the gods knew me. And so it took years for me to realize what a basket case my husband is. And then I got, wow, I've grown into this relationship, but wait, here's your present. It was wonderful.
Well, so he pulled the don't you feel like we've known each other forever thing.
Oh.
And I wrote him back and went, I feel like we're getting to know each other and we have a lot in common.
So I wouldn't say it's a red flag. I'm saying it's more mauve. It's mauve, it's not scarlet. It's a little inflammation.
And so then he came back and said, I really like you. And I just got up all in my head about it. And I think a lot of it was because I didn't go back and go, Yeah. I mean, I've never met you, right? To me, it's all
Mm.
about the meat. If you if we don't have chemistry in person, then, what are you doing? Why are you laughing at me?
You didn't hear what you just said, did you?
No.
To me, it's all about the meat.
Oh, well, that's not what I meant.
I'm assuming you're not talking about Arby's. I'm just saying those were the words that came out of your mouth hole.
It's about meeting. It's about the meeting and the chemistry. And if there's chemistry there, we do have a lot in common. We really do. We're both ambitious. We're both, we're ambitious in that artsy kind of offbeat way. So we're trying to make our way in very different, unique ways. So that really, and we both kind of have an entrepreneurial spirit and it's nice to kind of talk to somebody who also has that as well. Um, so yeah, we'll just have to see. I know I'm not saying they're like giant red flags. I'm saying they're like little mauve, maybe
Oh,
orange,
goodness, no.
orange flags, maybe.
Orange. Yeah. Well, I feel really bad. Can we just take a moment to talk about how bad I feel for the color orange? It's not good days for the color orange. It's really not. In a
No,
greater
it's not.
global context, the color orange, it's just sitting there doing its thing, being happy, being golden. And then along comes this situation. It's kind of like Norse practitioners, they've been casting their runes for years, and then come along neo-Nazis. Like,
Yes.
orange didn't do anything to us, but now it's become synonymous with something awful, you know.
Yeah.
But I hope your day goes well. You deserve it. And from what you showed me, I'm exceptionally happy for you. And I hope that this
I
day goes.
I hope it's good too. I do like him a lot, and I do, what I've talked to him. But I have in the recent past met a guy who was so into me so quickly that it screamed
Mhm.
narcissism. That's what narcissists do. They love bomb you. And
Also, like borderline personality disorders.
yeah, they do this love bomb thing, and then the love bombing leads to bad things. And
Mhm.
I was actually telling Kathy about this other guy, and I was like, and then he said this, and then he said this, and then I said, oh, I have to break up with him. And she goes, yes, yes, you do. There are flags. It's a whole platoon of flags. I was like, yes, you're right. I got to break up with him. Thanks for listening. I got you now. Takes me a minute. Sometimes I have to hear myself say it, but then it's good.
I feel like
Um,
if you are poly and dating, you need what I'm going to call the Rumsfeld calendar. You remember Donald Rumsfeld from like the George Bush administration? And it was like
mhm.
after 9/11, and it's like today's a red day, today's an orange day. It's like it's a threat level assessment, but it's in calendar form. So it's like every time they do something, you tick that threat level up. And when it gets to a certain color, you're just like, bye, deuces, okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah. Well, this was the guy that I actually tried to like just ghost because we'd only been on one date. And then he
Mm.
tracked me down, right, and said, how dare you ghost me? We had something special, like, right. Like it was, I was like, okay, well, let me try this again. I'll call you. And so I called him and I said, this is non negotiable. We are not dating anymore. I have some concerns about your behavior, period. We are not dating anymore. And he goes, well,
Mm.
don't I get to plead my case? I said, you can plead your case all day long if you'd like to. I'll listen. And it will not change a thing. So,
You
yeah.
can plead your case, but in our house, we follow the Klingon court jurisprudence. It involves pain, sticks, and three very large people.
Well, he took the message when I put it
Yeah.
in his ear. Yeah. He
I
took it
mean,
loud and clear. And I said, and I'm blocking you again on
yeah.
everything. Don't come back. So
Mm, mm,
he was cute chocolate too. That's
mm.
why this other thing makes me nervous.
Well, don't let one crazy put you off all kinds of crazy. Because listen, you know,
It's true.
there was this terrible, terrible, could never happen in real life movie. It had Faye Dunaway in it, and oh, he played George Costanza. I can never remember. Jason
Yeah.
Alexander. was called
Yeah.
Dunstan Checks In, and it was about an orangutan that gets loose in this five-star hotel in New York City, and hilarity ensues and all that. But Faye Dunaway is this very terrible, terrible hotel owner. She's just an awful person. And at one point, she says the phrase, I like obsessive people. They get things done. Because the exterminator they hired because they thought they had rats was also Pee Wee Herman and was insane. And I
Right.
have just taken that into my heart space. I like obsessive people that get things done. In the dating scene, it has other issues though. Like
Yes.
if somebody's not a little off, I don't know that I can actually be attracted to them.
No,
But
yeah, they need to be a little weird. They
yeah,
need to be a little quirky. Quirky is
yeah,
good. Yeah,
yeah. Like
nothing wrong with that.
my ex Adam told me once, he's like, Kyler, watching you date is painful. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, because you're a really great person, but you go for people who maybe aren't. And I'm like, Adam, we dated. He's like, I know, I speak from experience. It's like as soon as you meet somebody who's halfway cute, you're like, what's that amazing scent? Broken? Is that broken by your parents? And it's funny because if you know Adam, he's not really one for a turn of phrase. He's one for a PSA because he is wonderfully artistic and autistic. And as soon as my mouth can actually put those two words together, it's going to be a new term. But it was wonderful, and I've paid attention to that bit of wisdom ever since. I think it's
I
how I
like
got.
it.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, the only other thing going over here is that my air conditioning is broken.
Oh yeah, yeah. How's that journey going in hot, hot Georgia?
Well, it turns out that if you go with a reputable company, and I mean a big, big company that's reputable, and you buy what you need, which
Hmm.
is not the most, not the most high Bluetooth activated thing, because we don't. So, okay, so I have this theory that the more electronics that are in your standard appliances, the more likely they are to die in 5 years. And I have this
Yeah.
based on a reason. There's a reason for this because I met this man who was an engineer for a large manufacturer of washers and dryers. And he said that those boards have a life, the electronic boards have a shelf life of 5 years,
Hmm.
deliberately built into them
Yeah.
so that they can be replaced every 5 years.
Yeah. Forced
That
obsolescence.
if you don't want that, you have to buy the basic model that turns with buttons and knobs and
Hmm.
doesn't talk to your phone and doesn't have any bells and doesn't have any bells and whistle. And he said if you buy those, they will last for 20 years because they are made to
Hmm.
last for 20 years. And this has been true. We bought a washer and dryer set when we got married. The dryer just recently gave it up. And
Hmm.
we went and had an argument with a salesperson about why we wanted the base model thing and not some big other thing. And they were like, but this is the, and I'm like, no, I want this little thing right here that does,
Hmm.
only I'd like a bigger drum. Do you have a bigger drum? Then we can do that. But outside of that, no, bigger drum. That's all I want. Um, so anyway, if you go with a big company, you're talking $18,000 or more. That is the guesstimate before they start taking things out of your house.
Don't know that I've ever
So,
seen that
uh,
particular look of shocked affront on your face. I've seen
oh
a
my
lot of
God. I
expressions.
was, Jesus Christ. I was like, what in the ever loving name of all that is holy are you putting in? Diamonds? Are there diamonds in these things? So we did a little, we actually took three quotes. And the last quote, there was a quote we got from a very reputable company, but what we liked about them was the technician that came out. And oh, by the way, the big companies, they won't sell you one unless you buy their 10-year um,
Service plan.
service plan, right? So you have to buy the service plan with it. And neither one of them could tell us this is how much the service plan is. because
Uh,
they want you to finance the whole amount because then they make more money on the interest. And this is one of the
mhm,
things that annoyed my husband greatly. He was
mhm,
affronted by this. What do you mean you can't tell me how much the equipment is, how much the actual labor is, how much the
mhm,
service? You should be able to break that out for me. It should not be a big deal, and nobody can do it.
mhm.
So not happy with that. So then we
That,
had this guy who came last year, looked at it, told us, by the way, you need a new system. And here, let me make it run for a little while longer. And so he did. And so he came out and he has a new business partner. His new business partner came out and he goes out, looks at the system, comes back in. There are things about the system that have clearly been cobbled together. For example, the outside unit is a 5-ton unit, the inside unit is a 3-ton unit. That's not supposed to happen. So there you go. That's the first thing wrong with our air conditioning. Air conditioning, that's one. Two, it doesn't, because of that, it causes airflow problems inside the house. And then all of them said that we needed a new return. Nobody would put in a system without putting in a new return into the house. So
mhm,
just think about that for a minute. New ductwork, new running of something. And nobody wanted to put the return where Tony was suggesting, because Tony suggested a place where there was already uh, a they would just have to make it actually is where it blows cold air, but it's the
mhm.
stupidest place to have an air conditioning unit vent. It's by the front door that
Oh,
faces south. And so it's got heat on it
mhm.
all day long.
That's
And
not
so,
efficient.
no. So he was like, can't we just turn this one into a return? Because it'll pull the air from the door,
Mhm.
right, into the system. And then I can stop blocking it off because it's not cooling anything right here.
Right.
And so the last guy who came, small company, um, we got to talking about it. He said, I agree with you. We could just put a return in right here, make this a bigger hole.
Mhm.
I will still have to run duct work, blah, blah, blah. But he agreed with Tony, so Tony liked that. And then he said, well, if you don't mind, how much was this other company going to charge you? And Tony goes, oh, I'll show you the quote because I want to know how much you would charge for the unit. And the guy did one of those, oh my God. Like I thought he was going to have a heart attack in my kitchen.
Mhm,
He was like, they're triple charging you for the actual unit.
mhm.
That unit should only be $1,500. And that's the good unit. That's not even that's got all the bells and whistles crap. And we
Mhm.
were like, oh. And he was like, no, man. Wow. Yeah, no. And so that's how we ended up with a better guesstimate of about $6,000. And so what's turned into this is that we've decided there's been some upgrades we've wanted to do to the house, like get rid of the carpet
Mhm.
that came with the house. So it predates us and it wasn't new and it
Mhm.
needs to go. And so get rid of all the carpet in the house. And we're actually going to not replace the back deck, but we're going to spruce it up. We're going to pull up dead boards. We're going to put
Mhm.
on a repair and fill in paint onto the
Mhm.
back deck. So we're going to do some work to the back deck and we're going to finish the stairwell that's not finished. And then we're going to pay someone to put in new floors. So,
Oh, okay.
uh,
So that's okay. So that's
and so,
usually where my brain was going to go because if Tony's doing a project, that project starts this big, but then it winds up that big
no,
because Tony is a perfectionist, but he's also a creative. And when those two things meet, that's when hilarity and frustration ensues.
no,
The product is gorgeous, but it will cost twice as much and take 5 times as long as you originally estimated it would.
yep. No, I told him, I said, if you want to get new floors in here, we need to pay someone to do it. Your time is worth that money. Period. It just is. Will
Mm-hmm.
it be done to your ultimate satisfaction? No, but it will be done. And that's what counts. And
it stands a chance of getting done before the actual date of your death due to like life expectancy. Like it's a thing.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what's been going on in my house, the saga of air conditionings. And I also wanted to say, while I was thinking about it, we've been on doing our little podcast through Circle Podcasts, and they have a bunch of podcasts. They have one in Spanish called Lunatic Mondays. That's a Spanish speaking pagan podcast. They
Mm-hmm.
have Songs of the Pagan Tribe, which is more music, less talk, and a lot. They do a lot about exposing new and upcoming pagan people. Then we have Circle Talk, where that's a discussion show with various guests every week, every 2 weeks that they do theirs, and then Selena's, of course, is um, Sounds of the Sacred Circle. I think that's what it is. And she's teaching and talking about her 50 plus years of experience in the pagan world. So those are really cool podcasts. And I just wanted to put a plug in here that you guys should go and listen to those other podcasts that are out there that are, since they're happily supporting us. And we want to thank those who have been listening because we've noticed the numbers. We really appreciate it. We're a new podcast and our numbers are not terrible. So that's really good.
We appreciate it. You guys love us.
You like us. Thank you. You really like us.
My Sally
So
Fields moment. I've waited so long.
I'm glad you knew that reference.
Well,
This is
I'm
why
not
I love you. You like me. You really, really like me. So what's going on in your world?
Oh my goodness. So in podcasts past, I've talked about how crazy work has been. That's a lot. Like I've got a lot of irons in the fire right now. So work has been interesting. Some things changing there, but for the better. Somebody raised their hand and kind of elected me to be on the quote unquote fun committee. I don't think they understand what it means to have an alpha level gay on a fun committee because we have no sense of proportion. We do not know when to stop. So they have seen this manifest. Our LGM, our store manager, decided to leave. She got a wonderful kind of lateral promotion. She's opening a new type of store, and we're very happy for her. But we loved her. She was great. She's probably the best director level manager I've ever had. Like
Nice.
she actually taught me to take a compliment and not expect a stick from a stiletto with it. Because, like, if you're raised in the South, the
Yep.
worst insults come in the form of a compliment. She actually taught me to be able to take a compliment better than I would take a tax audit, which is the work of a lifetime. Like she's doing all the God's work at that point. So we wanted to say thank you. So I threw one hellaciously large potluck. I mean, there was so much food. Nobody in that store had seen the like. And even people who were like doing 2 months of time away brought in brisket. Like it was a whole thing. And the goal was to make her cry. She did shed some tears that day. So, goal achieved. But now we're planning our next one. And I don't think that they fully understood what they were getting when they elected me to the high and vaunted position of fun committee. So that's been taking up a lot of my time. And preparing still for the great exodus. My mother has finally accepted that she does, in fact, have adult ADHD and it affects her splurging and spending. And so we had a conversation the other day about budgets and how
No.
budgets work and how if you don't stay on a budget, you're not going to have enough money to move to the other side of the country. And for the first time in my wonderful, chaotic little life, I have 100% buy-in from my mother. And when, and this happens very rarely because the universe can't take the imbalance, when the various members of my family harmonize on something, shit gets done. And that has now occurred. Like, she now understands what needs to happen. And oh my God, I'm not doing all the heavy lifting, and it's been wonderful. So, other than that, just my usual 57 hobbies. Yesterday I had
Mhm.
a spontaneous day off, so instead of resting when I probably should, I took a grinder to a giant stump and started carving a wolf's head because for no other reason than that stump had been staring at me for a while, you know.
Okay. A
Yeah,
giant. We're going to need pictures of that in the Discord channel. You can join us on Discord at Urbanum, which is podcast, and then you can see
yeah.
pictures of Kyler's cake. First of all, I saw a picture of the Twix cake he made. It was awesome.
Oh my
It was
God.
very beautiful. And then of
Wow.
his wolf head, evidently, that he's going to have. So you can see pictures of that too. I forgot to tell you, I went LARPing this weekend.
Yes, it was a beautiful outfit. You sent me pictures. I loved
I
these.
sent pictures of the outfit, yes. And we LARPed at a place called MomoCon, which is a con anime convention. And I learned a bunch of things. I want to go next year. I want to go on my own. I want to get more than a day pass. There are just things that I learned. But I walked 11,500 steps in 12 hours. And that is for you who don't know, my husband explained this to me. That is the equivalent of 5.5 miles.
Mm-hmm.
I walked 5.5 miles in 12 hours. Now I'm not used to walking a mile in any amount of time, much less 12 hours. But I had a great time. And I always like it when I'm part of the story, like this one they had hidden clues all over this room. And I found 2 of the clues. So I always like it when I'm that kind of involved, when I'm like, oh, I know where there's clues and I found them. Yay, me. So that was fun. And we had a good time. And I ended up taking out some monsters, which again, thanks for the long sword. And then one of my swords got banned for not being safe enough. So I'm going to have to take it apart over the summer and redo the tip. And they were telling me this, and I was like, the director of the LARP made this sword. And they went, really? He goes, okay, you really do need to fix the tip. I'm like, okay, I'm just saying I didn't make it.
Right.
The director made it.
So,
but I'm happy to fix the tip. Just tell me what I need to do. So I'll be taking that one apart. The other one passed, but again, the director didn't make that one. I actually bought that from someone who makes LARP swords for real. So yeah, so LARP, yay! Well, there's no segue from LARP. Well, I guess there could be to Gnosis.
Well, I mean, you could argue that LARP is a type of internal metaphor for a divine play.
Yeah, that's stretching, but sure.
That's yoga stretching. That's like you've got your 500 hours of yoga certification. This is like their final project stretching, but it's still there. You know, let's honor that the attempt was made.
So we're going to be talking about Gnosis, and really there are several different types, but unsubstantiated personal Gnosis, shared Gnosis, and confirmed Gnosis, or validation of Gnosis. But what is Gnosis? Like, that's a big word.
I don't know nothing about no Gnosis. What is Gnosis? I have been waiting literally 3 weeks to say that. Weird thing.
Okay, so are you going to tell them what Gnosis is, or am I going to tell them what Gnosis is?
Why don't you do it?
Because my definition of Gnosis is this: knowledge of the spiritual. So, but that's very broad definition, and I made it that way on purpose because that it can include anything. You go into a ritual and you get a strange knowing.
Mm-hmm.
That knowing is Gnosis, right? Now, whether or not that knowing is for everybody or just for the person standing next to you or whatever, that's called Gnosis. And I use this very broad definition of the knowledge of the spiritual because it is broad, and I feel like Gnosis should be broad. You, overachiever you, said in the philosophical and religious context, gnosis refers to special knowledge or insight, while Henoism refers to union or oneness. Gnosis often implies a secret or esoteric knowledge that can lead to spiritual awakening, while Henosis,
yeah, it's like
Henosis,
yeah.
Henosis describes the state of being united with the divine or transcendent reality. So why did you bring up Henosis?
Because, okay, so much of what we talk about involves like Wicca, which has an element to it that very few other religions have in quite the same way. And that is the drawing down process. So in Wicca, you can draw down the moon, you can pull a deity down, and they can speak through you. That is a state of henosis. That's a spiritual union with a deity or an aspect of a deity.
Okay.
And that there are some people who write about gnosis and they include henosis under that, but it's a slightly different process, but it's almost like different levels of that connection. Gnosis being the larger term, and then henosis being that more acute, that knowledge is coming directly channeled through you.
Right. And even in henosis and in gnosis, I would say in either of those, the validity of them should be questioned unless verified. And we're going to talk about verification here in a little bit. But I wanted to also let Kyler cover Gnosticism, which is, you'll meet a lot of people who say I am Gnostic, which comes from the same word gnosis. And what is that all about? Usually they're Christian.
Yes. So Gnosticism. So if you ever talk to somebody, you're like, are you religious? Well, I'm agnostic. So they all come from that same root Greek word, which means to know. So the Gnostics are the people who don't take an orthodoxic view of like Christianity. So Christianity is ostensibly a religion of the word, of the book. So it's a revealed religion, right? Whereas paganism is an ecstatic or fertility religion that it grows up organically with the needs of the people. That's why there are so many different variations of it. When you're dealing with Gnosticism, this is somebody who eschews, who says, I know what the book says, but I'm connected to God inside. And there's been lots of movies and riffs on this throughout popular culture. Part of it has to do, that's actually at the root of some of the changes in the Protestant Reformation. People in classic Christianity, to speak to God, you had to go through the priest. With Gnosticism, you don't have to. God is in you everywhere. And it doesn't matter if it's the Christian God or you're dealing with an immanent deity like Lu or Zeus or something like that. When you have a Gnostic connection, they're in you. Like there's a resonance in you, and you pull knowledge and ethical wisdom and all of that through it. So Gnosticism and Orthodox Christianity have a very long, very bloody history, and they are two very different paths that separated fairly early on. Like the people who believe that Jesus was immaculate, like immaculate conception, and Jesus never laid with a woman and all that other because he was this divine seed given forth on life. The Gnostics are like, no, Jesus had to go to the bathroom. Y'all, he ate food. He was a man. And that doesn't mean he's any less divine. We all have God inside of us, the same as Jesus. So that's like Christian Gnosticism. But it's also where we get agnostic, which I know that there's a higher power, but I know that it is so big I'll never be able to understand it.
Right. And I think that the difference between the reason why gnosis is not something that's talked about in Christian religions is because it is of the word, and there is always an accepted authority of the word to tell you what to believe, right? So there's not a lot of what we call discourse where people sit around and debate what the scriptures mean. There is, in each of the major Christian religions in the United States, they have their catechism, and the catechism says, this is what we believe, and everybody who is one of us believes this. And the catechisms become very, very important. In order to become a Catholic, you have to go through catechism class, and then you have to profess that you agree to everything that's taught in the catechism class. So that's the way of the church, saying, this is what we believe. You have to believe like us to be one of us. And they don't talk about gnosis because there's a priest, and the priest is the intercessor between a person and divinity. So the priest is going to tell you, if you have a divine thing happen, you go to the priest, and the priest tells you what that means. And he's the authority on this. And that's where you get papal bulls, where the Pope sits in a very specific seat, and whatever he gives there is the divine word of God and must be treated as such, and that becomes a papal bull. So those kinds of things. That's why we don't talk about that so much in Christianity. Gnosis was something that I didn't know about until I became a Christian, and honestly, until I started studying Ogham, weaving wise words of wisdom by Erin Rowan Laurie. She's a Celtic Reconstructionalist. And she gave her whole first chapter is on gnosis and what gnosis is, and there's reasons for that. Some of those reasons have to do with studying a religion, the Celtic religions, that were oral traditions that were killed off deliberately by Roman empires. And so they don't have their oral traditions anymore. They killed the Druids. And so the Druids weren't left to tell us what all of these things like the Ogham means. So now we find ourselves in a time where we're trying to rediscover the meaning of these things. And then it becomes because we're not of the book, and because there's not one authority that would be recognized by everybody, although I think Laurie is a good authority to start with, in my opinion. But if you wanted to start with anybody, I would start with her. But there's no authority that everybody's going to agree to. And because of that, then they have to agree to gnosis. And gnosis is that spiritual knowledge. And they speak about this in Celtic Reconstructionalist as the difference between imbus and asling. An imbus is ecstatic poetic inspiration. So I'm in an ecstatic trance, and all of a sudden I see that the Ogham that is loose means this. Okay, that's an ecstatic sudden knowledge. Aisling is a dream or vision. So I go into a dream, or I have a vision that tells me what loose means. The difference is that could be different for every single person who meditates on loose, right? It could be a billion things. And so that's why there are stages to gnosis. And the first one is unverified personal gnosis. That's where you get a vision of loose, and now you understand what loose is to you. And then say you go out and you meet with other people who are studying the Ogham, and as you're talking to them, you find out that they've had a similar vision of loose, and they describe it, and it's almost exactly like you. Now what you have is something called shared gnosis. So now you have more than one person separated across time and space who have the same insight. And now you take it to the investigation phase. So now you're going to go look in any sacred books we have for things that will back up what has happened to these two people. And that may be finding other people who've had this experience, finding other writings that hint to this or could be interpreted that way. And that leads to confirmed gnosis or validation of gnosis. So that's kind of how she laid gnosis out. But it's important because every pagan Wiccan who is spiritual is having gnosis.
Mm-hmm. That's part of the point of being in an eco-spiritual religion or movement, because you are looking inside yourself and you're finding the wisdoms of the universe, of the gods, of the spirits reflected inside. And that is a Gnostic approach. And I think that the interesting thing here is when you teach public classes, and Dia, you'll probably back me up on this, when you teach public classes, you get a lot of people coming to you and talking about their their knowings, their personal gnosis. This is how I've engaged with this deity. This is how I've done this. This is what's been revealed to me. And it's a lot of times they're seeking validation. Like they want someone to agree with them. And I think like we were talking about Christianity being a religion of the book, and you have a priest that's an intercessor and all that. We live in a culture that it's not valid until other people agree with you. It's very difficult to stand on your own and just trust your inner voice, because we come from a culture that teaches us not to trust ourselves, not to trust our judgment, not to trust our instinct. And it's, earlier we were talking about dating and red flags and all that. It's like some of us have learned to trust that inner voice that says, no, this is a red flag. And others make the same mistakes over and over again. And it kind of comes from the same thing. We don't trust our own voice. And gnosis starts out as this wee, small baby voice in the way back of our head. I think the number one question I get asked by new practitioners, or even practitioners who've been a year in a year or two, they're like, is it my imagination, or am I actually knowing this? Like, where is this coming from? The answer to that question is inherently personal. I cannot answer that for you. You have to find your own relationship with that voice, because that's how it's going to manifest in you.
I agree. And I think that's one of the reasons why I am such a heavy dedicate of the Morgan, because the Morgan teaches sovereignty. I can never say the word right. Sovereignty. It teaches you to own your own stuff. That's what it teaches you. It teaches you to be bold and know what you know, and not afraid of what you know, and not afraid to tell others what you know. But then there comes this place called ego.
Oh, ego. She went there so soon in the conversation.
Did. Because ego can cause you to think things that may not be true. And so what your question shouldn't be is I'm having gnosis? The question should be, is this gnosis ego free? That's the real question. Am I having gnosis? Yes. Is this gnosis ego free? That's the part. That is why to know is the first one we talk about all the time: to know, to do, to will, to be silent. To know is the first one, because you have to know yourself. You have to know what kind of ego you have. You have to understand that ego. And one of my favorite sayings, I had a high priestess say one time. She said that in history, I was Calliope. Is that it's written by Shakespeare, and she was the seer that nobody believed. Cassandra. So I have been accused of being Cassandra in a past life. And I said, come on. And then she looked at me and said, no, it's okay. Everybody can have one like real important person in their back history. But if you get more than that, it's a little suspect.
Well played, former unnamed high priest. Well played.
And I was like, okay, sure. You can call me Cassandra then. That's fine. Yeah. If that makes you happy, that's fine. I'm not going to say that haven't been Cassandra or a Cassandra type person. I can't tell you that, but okay, whatever. But ego is a big problem. And I currently, ego and mental illness. And there was a class once that I went to, and I was so disappointed. I need to do this class. Is how do I know if what I'm experiencing is mental illness versus personal gnosis? And where is that line? And I have some very specific rules about this. And rule number 1 is, if your personal gnosis is telling you to hurt yourself or someone else, it's not gnosis, it's mental illness, right? Are you with me, Kyler?
Absolutely. Oh, I absolutely am. I was attempting to write down your first rule with my left hand, and I realized that I can, in fact, write kanji.
So that's my first rule. If they want you to harm yourself or someone else, then you are moving into the room of mental illness, and you need to seek help. The second one is if it has a grand conspiracy that relies on 1, 2, 3 or more weird things. So, for example, aliens exist. Okay. Aliens come to the earth. Okay. Mm-hmm. Aliens come to the earth and slice up cows. Okay, maybe. Now we're getting into, I'm not sure about that. Yeah. Aliens come to earth and inhabit my body and tell me what to tell you. Okay, now you've slid off your personal gnosis. Now you've gone again into the area of maybe either being a con man or being some kind of mental illness that needs to be addressed, right? So I call it the three or more rule, that the conspiracy has to go 3 places away. And you can see in my example here that everybody knows aliens exist now. The government said it. Aliens exist. That's not bad. Okay, fine. Yes, we all agree. Aliens or unidentified flying objects or whatever they're calling it these days, that it exists. That's what they're saying. Yes, they've clearly come to the earth, again, because we've had the government tell us that. Cutting, doing funny things to cows. There's nobody saying that's what happened. There's no evidence that that's true. And then when you get into, I am the high muckety muck of the aliens because they came into my body, that's where you really have slipped right off into the 4, right? Yep. So that's kind of how. What'd you say?
You're in an L. Ron Hubbard salad.
Yes, you're in an L. Ron Hubbard salad when you get that. That's so true.
I'm going to get so much hate mail for that joke.
I know you are. Don't ever pick on those people. I'm not even going to say their name. Right. Not going to say their name. Look it up for yourself if you want to know who L. Ron Hubbard is. I am not saying that. So that's number 2. So harm, and then the 3 or more rule when it comes to conspiracy with whatever it is you've envisioned. And then the last one is the ego rule. Does this make you look more important, better than everybody else in some way, make you special, make you unique, make you look, have and deserve more attention or whatever? And if it does, then it's quite possibly your ego, not necessarily mental illness, just your ego, right? Mm-hmm. Just your ego interfering with what's being told. And my example of this is Expectus Patronus. When I went onto the Podmore site, which is no more, you could find out what your Expecto Patronus was, and mine was a mouse. And not only was it a mouse, but you could go back and try 3 times. Mine was a mouse freaking 3 times. My friends are having phoenixes and owls and wolves, and here I am, a mouse that couldn't scare anything but an elephant. That's what I kept saying, right? But that's my ego. My ego wants there to be a big phoenix because that's cool. My ego didn't want to hear why I might have mouse as one of the animals associated to me. It may not want me it doesn't want me to hear how I've been gathering information all my life and cataloging that and keeping that, and that there's purpose for that, and that not everybody does that. Not everybody goes around and picks up all the kernels of things left over and tries to weave them together. That's different way to look at mouse, right? So you have to be extremely careful of your ego when you talk about gnosis. And that's what I have to say about that. What else where else are we going?
I love that you went here. Would you mind if I riff for a quick moment?
Oh, riff on.
Okay, so I love the influences that we got in the 60s and 70s, the awakening that this country went through, and then the way that propelled psychology and everything into the limelight. We now understand far more about how the human mind works than we ever have at any point in human history, and I love that. What I do not love is incomplete psychobabble. And I'm going to say incomplete psychobabble, and I know that's probably going to irritate somebody. I'm going to give context for that. self-help books became a huge thing. And certainly through the 90s and the early 2000s, they were everywhere. And many of them give great advice. They really, really do. I've rarely come across a self-help book that doesn't give some bit of good advice on how to handle challenges or things in your life. If nothing else, to just keep a stiff upper lip and soldier on and, all that. The problem is ego. Most people have a very incomplete idea of what ego is. And to filter out ego, you have to understand that you have to have an ego. Like you have to have an ego. And a healthy ego allows you to adjust to problems in your life. Ego, it's kind of like self-absorption or being self-centered. That's not necessarily a bad thing. In order to live a healthy life, you have to have moments of self-absorption, of self-centrism, so that you can evaluate inside what's going on in your life. That's how you have a balance between how you're being fed versus how you're feeding others. If you are constantly in a state of pious humility to the point where you are just sending all that energy and love and care and everything out, but you're never leaving enough space to take something in, that is a problem. Same thing with ego. A healthy ego allows you to adapt to problems. An unhealthy ego is going to cause you issues both in your interpretation and your interpersonal relationships, all of that. Ego, the job of ego is to be the liaison, the lubricant between the gears of your subconscious, the primal part of you, the jealousies, the loves, the covetousness, all of that. And that logical thinking brain, that cognitive part of you that's not about emotion, that's not about feelings, it's about cause and effect, ABC, sequential progressions, all that fun stuff. Those two parts speak two very different languages, and the ego is where they meet in the middle, and the subroutine, the function of our brain to let them deal with one another. And it is so important because ego defenses are like if I were to list out the 6 major ego defenses, we all know people who engage in this, and it's usually comes from a place of hurt. It's because they're trying to process through trauma while living their daily life. And we see this in the craft a lot with the concept of matrons and patrons, which if you're talking about gnosis and henosis, matrons and patrons, if a deity is going to speak to you, it's probably going to be a matron or a patron. Matrons and patrons are not your parents. They can be, you're connected with them. These are functions of the universe. Deities are huge. The number of times I've seen young people work through their psychological issues by putting deity in the role of mom and dad or sister, brother, lovers, uncle, aunt, those archetypal positions and get stuck there happens a lot. And that's where, in that milieu, that's where we get a lot of that misinterpretation because there's an over personal identification. And I just wanted to give a shout out to that because that is like one of the number one things I have seen over 20 years of teaching and working in groups is we get stuck there. And a lot of people find their way to the craft because they felt rejection or they've been ostracized from, a greater community. So they're much more prone to experience something like that. And it's a natural part of the growth process. I'm not pointing or calling anybody down for it. I'm just saying be aware of it. Because when you're aware of it, you can grow through it. You can bring it in, you can absorb it and move past it.
Well, and I think also it might be helpful to mention the woo theory here, which is a theory that I wrote a long time ago. And woo theory is what it's talking about is gnosis that someone has that when they tell you it, you go, oh, that's woo theory, right? So someone said you go on a meditation to find your totem animal and they come back saying that the king of all dragons has crowned them the prince of all dragons and shown them that the whole earth will bow before them. That is ooh, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So here's the rules of the woo theory. The rule of the woo theory has to do with a graph that has time on one lineage, right? And how high the woo is on another. And so what this means is if your woo is small, right, then it's okay to share that woo in time very quickly.
So, but if your woo is really high, then it should be a long time before you try to tell anybody that. And I'm going to give some examples of from different people. This is not necessarily me, but I'm going to give some examples. So, for example, this was mine. I was sitting talking about Renee, and somebody said, "Don't you think Renee would want you to do that?" And before I could say yes or no, the smoke detector flew off the wall and hit me in the head. Okay. If that wasn't Renee hitting me in the head saying yes, I'm not sure what else I needed in life, right? But that's woo. That is definitely a woo story, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. It doesn't necessarily make me look like anything other than an idiot because I was getting smacked across the head from a ghost by way of a smoke detector, right? She smoked like a chimney, by the way. So there was all kinds of ironic things happening in that exchange. But that's okay, right? I tell that story a lot. People laugh. It's not. I'm not grandizing myself. The belief of, and here's a good one, I am an otherkin. I was born of magic, and magic has made me whole, and I can perform magic more than anybody else can perform magic. And I have this belief of my other kenness, and I am looking for other kens. And are you an other ken? That, my dear friends, would be ooh, and that might be something you would want to save until you know somebody really, really well and still anticipate they may not believe you, right?
Yeah.
The higher the woo, the longer it should take you to expose it. And it is a red flag if you meet someone and in the first 10 minutes of meeting them, they're wooing you really hard. That's a red flag. And it should be a red flag to you if you're the one doing it. That should tell you your ego's a little out of control. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't seem to comprehend in your head, hey, maybe I shouldn't be saying this. I always say to my son when he was growing up about his gifts, I would say, keep it safe, keep it secret. Gandalf says this, by the way. Keep it safe, keep it secret. It is not for you to parade about and tell people. It could get you in trouble. It could get you hurt. It could get you any number of things. It could get you ostracized. Be careful how you share this information, because sane people understand you have to be careful how you share this information. So that's the woo theory. Woo.
I had almost forgotten about the woo theory. I remember whenever you shared that with me years and years and years ago, and I loved it so much because it was so true. Like when you work with the public, you see folks at every different guidepost in their journey. And I learned very quickly, it's not for me to judge where they are, if they're right or if they're wrong. Their journey, like I don't want to be judged. I'm not going to judge anybody else. That being said, I have been on the receiving end of some thoroughly epic woo. And
yes,
there have been times where my intention to be out of a state of judgment has been challenged with some of these woos. And it was, no, I cannot believe I've forgotten the woo scale. Like I feel like I've just rediscovered an old friend.
Oh, I will post my writing about the woo scale on Discord at Urban Unwitches Podcast. It'll be in our reference section, so you can go look that up there. And it's a little paper that explains woo and explains the woo scale, and might be a good thing for you to know about. So back to Gnosis. We've kind of strayed off topic a little bit. We're back to Gnosis. So I'd like to talk a little more in depth about the 3 stages of Gnosis, of Gnosis. And the first one is the individual or unverified personal Gnosis, unverified or unsubstantiated personal Gnosis. And I thought maybe we could give some examples, personal examples of that for ourselves.
Yes. There is a plethora. There's a cornucopia, a myriad even of stories. Do you want to go first? Or want me to go first?
You go first. I just told a story.
Okay. We're on a 1-in-1 scale for storytelling. We've worked out a rhythm, y'all. That's how you know we're professionals. Um, I think the number one that comes to mind, and I may have mentioned this one, I think I may have in a previous podcast. It's probably not one that's aired yet, so I'm gonna grab the opportunity again. So this was something I got to witness. It didn't happen to me personally, and I'm very thankful because the teacher and priest that this happened to was much more graceful than I would have been. I am sassy now. In my younger days, my mouth was a thermonuclear weapon that knew no nuance. It was a little brutal. And I've grown a lot since then, we'll put it that way. But we're in a class, and a good friend of mine is teaching this class, and he is a good teacher. I mean, he was a pretty solidly great teacher, and never really gave himself enough credit for that. Was patient, was understanding, all that. Well, we had somebody visiting our group that day and had never been there before, and we were talking about the Sabbats, and we were talking about the oak and the holly king, as well as the stag and the boar and all that, like that we see in the British Isles and in like Reconstructionist Celtic lore. Well, we know that the oak and the holly king, the stag and the boar, these actually come from 18th and 19th century folk poems and songs. Like there's a huge trove of really amazing folk work that comes out during the 17th through the 20th century in British writing. And regardless of your relationship with Victorian scholarship and all that, they're wonderful. There is absolutely no providence prior to that of the oak and the holly king or the stag and the boar. That does not mean that it is not an absolutely exquisite metaphor. And this teacher was in no way, shape, or form denigrating that, actually honored it. Well, during the break, this person comes up to my friend and begins to tell them, it's like, well, I know that the oak and the holly king were real. These are actual divinities. And the intensity was such that my friend's eyes got a little bit wide and nostrils flared a bit and took a step back because this was like right up in their face. And they attempted to explain that we're talking historically, there's no literary providence before that. I'm not saying that you haven't had this great experience and that, things were called down. It's like, well, in the ritual, there was a whole battle, there was all of this, and they just kept going with it. And in their knowing, because they were in a state of gnosis during this, they were part of group mind, they were witnessing this was the truth, they felt the truth of this in their bones. Absolutely. Humans deal in metaphor and imagery. We cannot understand the words of the gods directly because they are not people. They don't speak in our language. And it was so intense and so uncomfortable. And my friend did a phenomenal job of diffusing it, but that person was so offended. They never came back. They were deeply offended. They didn't even come back from break because they could not get my friend to admit that the oak and the holly king were imminent, hard polytheistic deities. They were done. And it was because they had that unverifiable personal gnosis on that. They knew in their heart it was true, and no other truth could be as big as that truth. And that to me really kind of, I think, illustrates the danger of taking that UPG. That's the shorthand we always use, UPG. Taking that UPG and just running with it completely out of context and doing no verification, doing no check-in with other people or any historical research into it. It was super uncomfortable, and it really rattled my friend, who was a young teacher at that point.
Well, and I have to say that this is a place to remind all that witches are of the gray. And just because it is true that there was no reference before the 1800s of the holly king and the oak king and the stag, that doesn't mean that they are not polytheistic divinities that can be manifest into a ritual. One thing doesn't preclude the other. We live in a place where two things can be true at one time. And so that's one of the things that makes us different from the book, the book religions, the religions of the book, because we aren't looking for absolute truths. We're looking for truth. And truth, sometimes one thing is true and this other thing is true, and they're all true at the same time. So just a friendly reminder that I'm sorry that he left, because one didn't preclude the other. But clearly he couldn't understand that. And that comes from damage done to us by Christian religions, quite frankly, where we're told there's an absolute truth and that's the only truth. So go ahead.
I was going to say, I use the terms big T and little t truths. My personal truth are little t truths. I know very, very few big T truths. And when I'm pressed on any of the ones that I do hold to, there's still assumptive bias there. Like we are so finite. Big T truths, that's not really given us to know. We don't need to know big T truths.
Right. So my unverified personal gnosis is this. I was studying my first degree, and in my first degree, by the time I was in my third degree, I'd read 100 books from a book list that was given to me by Richard Sells. I don't remember them all. Don't ask. I have the list. If you ever want it, I will give it to you. And a lot of the books have been disproven. So I would, and I actually have notes on that. So anyway, but one of the things I was told to do was I had to go look up hieroglyphics and do a spell in hieroglyphics. And so I went to the library and I ended up in the children's section, because that was the only place where they had a book on hieroglyphics, was in the children's section. And I'm running my finger down the spine of a series of books looking for the book that had hieroglyphics in it. And I ran my finger, and then I touched this book, and I very clearly remember there was a quick spark. I looked where my finger was, and above my finger it said DIA, which is my name, Dia. And I was like, holy. So then I slowly pulled the book back, and it was called The Seven Ravens. Now, why would this be important? It is because 20 years ago, before the Morgan was popular, the Morgan and I had a relationship, and the ravens were, for me, her messengers. And so then I passed out and came to with a librarian looking at me going, "Are you okay?" And I'm going, "Where's the book? Where's that book? I gotta have that book." So I took that book, and this is how old I am, y'all. I went to a copy place and copied the whole book, from every single page, and I actually have a copy of the outside of the book too, where the title is and everything of the book. So I know, and the spine where it said my name, because I didn't want myself to ever forget that this was a personal gnosis that was happening to me. Now, did I take this book and think this is something for everybody? No, because it was for me. And The Seven Ravens is a fairy tale. You can actually read some about it if you get The Seven Swans by Starhawk. The Seven Swans is a variation of The Seven Ravens. But it was a spell, and I've read the book many times. I read it throughout my life, and it has meant different things to me at different times. And I understand that for me, this is the story of my life, and I am, metaphysically the story of my life, and it's about the people and places and things that I've come into contact with. So, but that's my own personal gnosis. It doesn't have to be for everybody. So that's my example of unverified or unsubstantiated personal gnosis. Although I would say there's some substantiation there. But nobody will ever be able to prove that the Morgan said, "Here, read this book." Mm-hmm. That's always going to be my opinion, right? Outside,
I was actually gonna toss in my actual first experience with like full on smack me in the face personal gnosis is actually your fault.
Okay, not sorry.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm very thankful, though it led to many an adventure. It was actually our very first meeting at Florida Pagan Gathering in like what 2013, 14, something like
Yeah,
that,
something like that.
many years ago. And you threw a piece of knowledge at my face, and I knew it so utterly and so truthfully that it literally knocked me back on my heels for months after that, because that piece of information was not something that I had ever expected. And but then there it was, and I have had a wise companion in the back of my head ever since because of that. It was 100% your fault. So thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
No problem. So the next part is shared gnosis. And I actually, I think I've shared this story before. I might not have. I'm going to be as misleading as possible on purpose, just for the record. So once upon a time, I went to a gathering in Florida, which wasn't Florida, just so we're clear. So I go to a gathering in Florida, and there is a main ritual that's going to happen. And the guy who is going to cast this circle has been smoking a cigar that he rolled himself. And then he had smoked this cigar all day. Everybody had seen him with this cigar in his mouth all day. And so then we went to main ritual, and he cast the circle with the cigar. I didn't like how it felt. Felt a little off to me, felt a little disrespectful to me. That was just my personal opinion. And then when the energy started really going on, I didn't like the energy either. And I did something that I will never do again. I took 3 steps back from the circle, thinking that I could break myself from the circle of energy, be on the outside, and not make a scene by leaving. Pretty soon, something bumps up against me, which is odd because I have taken 3 giant steps away from the circle with my husband. And I look, and this woman goes, "I'm sorry, can I stand next to you?" And I said, "Sure." And she goes, "The energy feels funny. I don't like it." I said, "Okay." So I threw the energy. I was holding a little bubble of energy around myself and my husband, so I threw it over her. Pretty soon I feel something bump on my other side, and I look over, and there's another person huddling into this circle of energy that I've created. And pretty soon there are like 20 people who have all taken 3 steps back from the circle and are now huddled in around me, where I have thrown this energy of protection around us. And that is a shared personal gnosis, right? We all had the same feeling. We all wanted the same thing, i.e., to not be part of that energetic exchange. We all wanted to do something different. And so we took action, and that action really impacted that circle. Because later, the people who were running the energy said, "What the hell happened over there in the West?" And I was in the West. So what the hell had happened is I had stepped out of the West and took a bunch of people with me, very innocently. I wasn't trying to disrupt the circle. I was actually trying to stay out of the circle. But that's a good example of a shared personal gnosis. Clearly everybody in that moment all felt something similar, and we all sought the same resolution. That's a shared personal gnosis. And it's shared just by the people on our end, right? Because not everybody felt that way. I would say that afterwards I heard about 50-50. 50 thought it was and 50 people thought it was not really good energy. So it was a 50-50 split for everybody else. I think part of what I did wrong was by putting up energy that was more balanced, it kind of called to the people who were feeling icky. And that's what happened. So anyway, shared personal gnosis, that's my example.
Yeah, and I think that giving yourself the freedom to feel how you feel is super important. because like, regardless of whether you're right or wrong, they didn't want to be in that, and they felt it, and they felt that what you offered was more balanced. So like, I've been in circles that are just ick. They're ick. And I don't blame the people who put them on. I don't blame anything. It's just for whatever reason things weren't in balance. I will remember the very first public ritual I ever went to. And I was a wee baby pagan at the time, so I didn't recognize that this was much older language, but the woman who was putting this on was Gardnerian trained. And
Mhm.
there is some language that is very high-handed in, at least I take it as high-handed. I mean, no
Mhm.
insult to Gardnerians out there,
Mhm.
because a lot of that language really depends on the energy you're putting into it, the emphasis you're putting into it. It can be high-handed. It can be very arrogant. I mean, this was
Mhm.
word written at the height of the British Empire. There was a certain kind of
Mhm.
embedded arrogance in it. I think we can all pretty much agree with that. The way she commanded the goddess down was almost point and click. Like, there was so much entitlement, there was so much direction, and I just immediately knew that this was not kosher. And I was so incredibly uncomfortable, and I was so new, I didn't know what to do. So I just sat there and took it. And I was like, I convinced myself I was the only one who had felt that. And it was, I mean, it felt like I was underwater, like there was pressure in my head. If if a deity, if a spirit comes into that circle, if it is called in, it should not feel like you're being squeezed in a submarine. At least not to me. It's sometimes you'll get that, but like, to me, it's a much more organic settling of that energy. It lifts as much as it settles on. And this wasn't that. It was just like boom. And I felt like pushed down, and it was very, very unpleasant. And I didn't actually go back to another public circle for a really long time because of that experience. But afterwards, we were doing kind of the mingling around, and I was so excited to finally get to meet other pagans, because I'd just been way out in the country and with me and my donkeys, because they keep coming up, and one or two little other wee baby pagans out in Levy County, Florida, which is the end of forever. Um, and other people told me, yeah, no, that was really weird. That was one person who actually worked with the shop that was hosting all this said, "This is your first time. I'm so sorry. I mean, this wasn't our best ritual, and you should come back." And I never did. But yeah, no, I kind of wish I'd had a Dia there, because I thought it was all me until someone else actually verified. And I think that that can be true of so many of our personal truths. Like, if we don't share, we never know. We're not an army of one. We're an army of many. And
Okay, so that's shared personal gnosis that we're talking about, shared gnosis. And then the last one is confirmed gnosis. And I had a different example for this, but I'm going to use the tarot as an example. So the tarot is a good shared personal, confirmed gnosis, because there is traditional meanings to these cards. And these traditional meanings, although they don't um, negate a personal meaning for a card, right? There is an energy for those cards that has been agreed upon. And the symbols are named for what they mean, and these cards are well researched and well written about, and that is a confirmed gnosis. So meaning, if you pull the Tower card, any good tarot person worth their salt would say change is coming for you, and your world's about to be turned upside down, so to speak. If you pull, I'm sorry, if you pull the Death card, they would say change is coming for you. If you pull the Tower card, change is coming for you, and it's not going to be pleasant. But the Death card is not, it's about transformation. It's not about death, right? And that's the understanding of most tarot readers when they talk about the Death card, because that Death card has been researched and studied, and people have meditated on it and done it, and that's what it means, right? It's a little harder to say that about the runes, although we do have writings that exist about the runes and what the runes actually mean. It's even harder to say that about the Ogham, because there was no no writings left. There's one page of a writing, one, about what the Ogham means. That's ancient, that people have to refer to. So everything has to be this confirmed gnosis that's validated through research, archaeology, and through people in different times and spaces having the same understanding. And that's Celtic Reconstructionalism kind of thrives off of this. This discourse of what things mean and what things don't mean and why they say that. And, you know, it's a very interesting place to go study about. But I think the Tarot to me is really the best, you know, confirmed gnosis that I can think of that we could give as an example. Do you have another one?
So I do. Again, this one is again your fault, Dia. You had coordinated to bring two kind of well-known pagans to the Atlanta area, Janet Farrar and Gavin Bone, and they had a whole series that they did, which culminated in a book they wrote, Lifting the Veil. And having a conversation with Gavin, on a first name basis, I'm just name dropping there. There was they had done basically the same drawing down ritual all over the world. Like they'd been in India, they'd been all over Europe, all that. And they would ask the same questions because they wanted to see what the answers would be. And they called on many different gods and goddesses. And the answers were always the same. And it wasn't them drawing down into themselves. They would teach a class, they would teach a community how to do the drawing down, and then people within that community would do the drawing down. And it was the same answers to the same questions. Like it was the same wisdoms coming through. And these are different communities, different cultural contexts, everything all over the world. And they had done hundreds of these drawing downs, and they were getting the same information. So that to me is another example of a confirmed gnosis. And you don't, I mean, gnosis, henosis, you don't get more, you know, right from the horse's mouth and, you know, through a drawing down. So like, and these were different languages, but they were saying the same thing. And that was a pretty profound moment for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good one. I forgot about that. That is a good one. And are we sure the book is called Lifting the Veil?
I just pulled it up because my memory for titles and author names is utter shite. I'm sorry, but I remember what's in the books. It's the same thing with the other day I forgot who Aerosmith is. Like, cut me a break. My brain has a lot in the buffer. But it was Lifting the Veil, A Witch's Guide to Trance Prophecy, Drawing Down the Moon, and Ecstatics. And it's got a very long subtitle, but it's Lifting the Veil.
It always does, yeah. It's trying to get those key terms in for the internet. Well, cool. So we've talked about all these different types of gnosis, henosis. We've told a lot of stories today, which I think is good. We like to tell stories. And I think we've about covered it. And we're on time.
What? I'm uncomfortable.
I know. We didn't go over.
How?
I'm not sure either.
Nonplussed. I never get to use nonplussed in a sentence. I'm nonplussed.
Yeah, we did. So let's talk about Resiliency Corner. I challenge you to do a meditation and find a personal gnosis for yourself. Whether that be you do a meditation to meet your spirit animal or your spirit guide or your angel or whatever it is that draws to you, I suggest you do a meditation and try to glean as much information about that person and create that personal gnosis as much as possible. And then take a little trip to the internet after you've decided what it said and see if you can verify any of that gnosis anywhere on the interwebs. And see what you think about who verifies it and who doesn't. Like, where are you getting the verification from? So that's my Resiliency Corner. What do you got?
So this was a sovereignty exercise that one of my previous teachers gave me, probably the most humble of my previous teachers. Miss Poppy was very good at taking the hot air out of the balloon when it needed to be. And I find some of us really need that from time to time. So she had me meditate on a personal truth, a little t truth, and then meditate on a big T truth. And then ask myself, like, to take that big T truth and really put it under the logical microscope, like, really try to shake its foundation. And legitimately, not a single big T truth was unassailable. And that was how she began to teach me assumptive bias. And I've taken that and I've now applied it to the world that we live in today. Like, I mean, there's a lot going on, but it reminds me that no matter how bad things are, I can assume that, country's on fire, all this other stuff's happening, doesn't matter. The world goes on. Just because my personal truth is things are awful right now, there are millions, billions of people out there who are not living in an existential fear constantly. And it pulls me out of that river of fear and anxiety. And it reminds me that, even if what I'm doing is on the micro, it's in my community. Every little thing I do lays a brick, a foundation for a happier, better future. And that gives me the resolve, the resiliency to keep my head up and to keep doing and building that community.
That's fabulous. I like that. That's a great exercise. And it reminds me of the way they used to teach esoterics, which maybe we'll talk about sometime. Yeah, I know. I want us to keep on time. So I'm gonna not bring up donkeys or anything else esoteric so we don't get off topic. I usually end with have a magical day. How do you end, Kyler?
It may be uninspired, but it feels really right. Also have a magical day, Dia.
All right, everybody have a magical day. So mote it be.
So mote it be.
Thank you for listening to Urban Unwitches. Please reach co-host Kyler Petrie and Rev Dia at urbanunwitches@gmail.com. That's urbanunwitches@gmail.com to suggest topics for shows or comment on past episodes. Please join our Discord channel, Urban Unwitches Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Urban Unwitches. Follow us on YouTube at Urban Unwitches to watch all episodes. And listen to all our past podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform. Rev Dia is a witch for hire as an officiant, life coach, astrologer, geomancer, and medium, and can be reached at www.revdia.net. See you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Circle Podcast, presented by Circle Sanctuary, and produced for all who follow nature-centered paths. Join us throughout the week for various programming connecting with the community around the world. Please don't forget to watch for updates on the Circle Sanctuary website at www.circlesanctuary.org. Follow us on Facebook at Facebook/Circle Podcasts. We can also be found on your favorite podcast hosting sites, such as iTunes, Spotify, and others. Until next time, many blessings.